So in preparation for Born Again, and just because I love Daredevil, I made my way through every Daredevil comic and anything he even remotely appears in. You know, something a sane person would do. Also, I could be excessively informed for a video that I didn't need to be nearly as prepared for, but I figured I could put all of that useless Daredevil knowledge I'd stockpiled in my brain, pushing out boring real-life stuff like how to do my taxes, to make at least a few more videos. The first of which is a listicle about the one thing that separates Matt Murdock from a lot of other superheroes, that being his inherent connection to the legal system and court cases. Of course, he isn't the first superhero to be a lawyer by day, but he is the most popular. Sorry, Jen, Kate, the clock. It's just true. And whenever a Daredevil story arc seemed to be building up to some court case, especially one that was legally or morally gray, I would perk up at the notion alone, growing more actively excited the closer the comic got to the courtroom debates. And who knows, that might just be me, because I have stressed how much I love courtroom dramas plenty of times on the channel, but I'm willing to bet that's a highlight from Daredevil's many stories over the decades for plenty of people. Welcome to Sandwich Reviews. I'm the talking sentient sandwich, your nihilistic optimist, and though there are endless inconsequential background cases that I won't be including, simply because that would make for just too many to take into consideration, and plenty of mock trials that surface, like the time an insanely powerful Leland Owsley put on a fake trial that Daredevil participated in, which was super fun, but none of those will be discussed. I'm talking about the cases where we see extended cross-examination sequences, compelling dialogue, and the trial itself. So, from iconic and popular Marvel characters he's represented, to cases that debate real and legitimate legal precedents, let's dive right in and find out which case ranks at the top. And this was supposed to just be 10, with a few honorable mentions of course, but I couldn't help but keep adding more and more. So instead, it's a baker's dozen. So let's start out with number 13, Johnny Storm versus Empire State University. Or at least I think that's its title. I'm not sure if they ever actually say the name of the case itself, but that's what I'm calling it. And it can be found among the other dense stories in Fantastic Four number 371, and continues on for quite a bit and is written by Tom DeFalco and Paul Ryan. And this one features the least amount of courtroom stuff, bouncing around from its many juggled storylines and only devoting a couple panels to Matt's legal conversations with the judge. But to summarize how we got here, because it does take quite a bit of explaining, this story occurs among multiversal escapades including another parallel Earth Fantastic Four team, the Invisible Woman and Sharon Ventrell's Miss Marvel, who also goes by She-Thing sometimes, both getting some interesting costumes, and an entirely separate subplot about Ben Grimm having a human form he doesn't want to let go of. Oh, also, Sable has some strike force going after Johnny the whole time. In any case, that all happens because Johnny accidentally goes supernova to defeat some Skrulls he's fighting, one of which he used to be married to, and he causes quite a bit of damage to a nearby university. Luckily, no one was harmed, but the university sues him, and of course, Matt steps in to defend him. Along with the help of the Fantastic Four's financial advisor, Makio Yakiki, Matt is able to get the charges dropped. Kinda. But Johnny is still required to go into police custody to demonstrate to the people that there are consequences. Though that just ends up with even more convoluted results I won't even begin to get into. But the Fantastic Four are always doing weird stuff. So instead of explaining, I'll just move on to number 12, Namor versus the human race. Well, the state, but Namor stresses many times he wants to challenge the entire surface world, which is in issue 7 of Daredevil's original series. After being tricked by Krang, who isn't Kang, but is basically Namor's Orm, or I guess Orm is Aquaman's Krang, since Marvel's Atlantis was created 20 years before. Anyway, Namor goes to the surface and decides to employ the first attorney he sees, which of course, after smashing his way through a circular door, is Nelson and Murdock. And the trial doesn't get any further than setting the date, which of course doesn't even come to pass, because Namor wasn't even going to wait one night, especially since he was being incarcerated on bail, but it does feature fun, albeit brief legal mumbo-jumbo from Matt and Foggy, so it makes the list. But up next, for number 11, we have Murdock versus the Daily Globe. And I could narrow it down to issue number 36 of Bendis's run and say it's all in that single chapter, but as with most of the cases on this list, plenty of the story and context comes from the surrounding issues. But I'll still try to give you a specific issue for each, but just know, at the very least, you'll probably want to read the whole arc that these are a part of. And I have this all the way at 11 because not too much is actually seen in the courtroom, even though I did set the rules that it had to have those scenes, but I picked this iconic case specifically because this shows Matt on the attack. He spends a brief time as a prosecutor, something that might come up again later, but the majority of time he spends in the courtroom is to defend someone, so he's usually on the back foot. But for this, Matt decides to sue the Daily Globe, the newspaper that outed him with an anonymous source. And everything goes somewhat smoothly for him in the legal system, but to help Matt cover his tracks, intervention from Vanessa Fisk was necessary to stop every cop on the take from going after him, even though further intervention from the Purple Man's children is necessary to truly make everyone forget Matt Murdock being outed as a vigilante, a retcon that has flip-flopped back and forth multiple times in all sorts of convoluted ways. And I thought this, out of everything, was an entertaining way for Matt to fight back against people believing he's Daredevil. It also has Luke Cage and Jessica Jones working for him as his bodyguards, which ingeniously ties in with Jones's Alias series, a great comic, yet doesn't have anything to do with Daredevil or the courtroom. So now, number 10. The Trial of Venom, in 1992's Spider-Man Special Edition, written by Peter David. And this doesn't feature too much court stuff, but the little bit that's seen is more than interesting. Representing Eddie Brock, who pleads that he shouldn't be punished for the atrocities committed by Venom, Matt is somewhat convinced of that being the truth. And while that isn't the case, and Venom happens to be hiding inside Eddie the whole time, you could point to this being one of the first cases of Venom's redemption, something that I may not want, because I personally enjoy Eddie Brock more as a villain, but has been central to his overall character in recent years. But moving on to number 9, The Trial of the Thing, featured in issue number 37 of Marvel's 1974 2-in-1 series, and this one was written by Marv Wolfman. There's honestly not much to say because the trial is skimmed over and very quick, but in it, the Thing agrees to be taken in by the police after, in his eyes, seemingly demolishing a street, which he did because he was feeling a pain that he described as a bee sting, and the initial charge on him is property damage, but that quickly expands out to every instance of the Thing breaking something substantial in the past, which is a lot of stuff. Matt uses character witnesses to try and convince the jury that Ben Grimm is a hero and wouldn't destroy someone's property without good reason, but that doesn't work. The Thing is charged as guilty and then immediately feels that bee stinging pain again and goes crazy. A lot of this was also incited by Alex Stone, a store owner whose property was demolished, and he leads the charge of all of the other citizens demonizing the Thing, but it is quickly revealed that he's actually an android created by the Mad Thinker. Daredevil and the Thing both make their way to his lair in their own roundabout way, and then have to fight the Vision for convoluted reasons, but that's not important, because that's all after the court case I'm here to talk about. So let's move on to number 8, Everyone versus the Incredible Hulk, which starts in Incredible Hulk number 152 and continues on into the next issue, with story credits, according to the comic itself, by the whole bullpen. But this case has the US government, including Nixon himself, but mainly Ross, going against the Hulk for the millionth time. After rampaging through Washington, D.C., the government subdues Hulk with an electric net of sorts, and they charge him with conspiracy to destroy public property and endangering human lives. The Fantastic Four, Daredevil, and even Spider-Man each get involved, with them all attempting to calm a very frustrated Hulk once he gets to court, which of course doesn't really work. Following a fight, the Hulk is put in a Hannibal Lecter setup, and I could look up what that's called, but you know what I'm talking about. Fortunately, all of the Avengers come and make sure he isn't unfairly tried. Unfortunately, that doesn't affect much, and the Hulk breaks out anyway. A similar interaction between Daredevil and the Hulk can be seen in the 1989 TV movie aptly named The Trial of the Incredible Hulk. And I won't lie, I'm probably biased because I used to love Bill Bixby's Hulk when I was super young, but this TV movie is genuinely incredible, although the trial is only in a dream sequence, so it barely deserves to be brought up. Yet I couldn't help myself. I mean, it's not really fair that I even mention that, because then it means I should count Punisher or even Coolio, but don't think about it too much, because back to the comics, with number 7, The People vs. Spider-Man, the third of the 3 side stories featured in Amazing Spider-Man Extra number 1, written by Mark Guggenheim. Still feeling the ripples of the Superhuman Registration Act and United States vs. Steve Rogers, Spider-Man is brought in to be prosecuted for assault and murder in the 2nd degree. And if that wasn't bad enough, a prosecutor adds onto those charges and makes it a civil case, filing a motion that would force Spider-Man to unmask himself in court, citing the 14th Amendment, Griswold vs. Connecticut, and even arguing against an analogy that involved the Spider-Mobile, all for the sake of Spider-Man's privacy. Matt tries and fails to prove that Spider-Man should be able to keep his identity hidden even when in court. Funnily enough, the fine print of the Superhuman Registration Act didn't allow for the police to unmask arrested vigilantes, something Matt tries to use to his advantage. However, the same can't be said for the federal level. Thankfully though, after some legal maneuvering on both sides, Matt has the genius idea to bring in other superpowered people wearing Spider-Man's costume, all to demonstrate the impossibility of proving who was wearing Spider-Man's suit when the offenses were committed. But now, number 6, the trial of Black Widow in issue 83 of Daredevil's original series. In the previous issue, someone witnesses the end of a battle against Scorpion at the top of the World Trade Center of all places, where it looks like Black Widow lets the Scorpion fall to his death. We all know that the Scorpion was just fine, but Black Widow is wrongfully convicted of his murder. And this was during a very weird time in the comics, back when Black Widow had Ivan the chauffeur almost like her own Alfred, and this is also when Daredevil and Black Widow met, and they would go on to live together. But this one is really significant because it's one of those rare cases where Matt and Foggy go against each other in court, which all happens because Foggy's being manipulated by some weird mastermind villain creatively named the Assassin, and to fully explain who that villain is would take an hour, though I'll quickly just say that it's Mr. Klein, otherwise known as MK9, an advanced robot from the future sent to the past to make sure his supercomputer father will exist, so that he can exist. God, comics are confusing, but I love them. Yet the case against Black Widow is dismissed by Foggy once evidence turns up by Daredevil that shows tampering with his Scorpion from the aptly named Assassin. But up next we have number 5. The State versus Melvin Potter in Daredevil number 173, which is a part of Frank Miller's run. In it, Melvin Potter, or the Gladiator, is accused of going on a killing spree in his neighborhood, and Melvin Potter is of course seen in the Netflix series. He's even thrown around some buzzsaws, and at one point is seen crafting what looks to be Stiltman's legs in the background. But if you couldn't guess, he crafts costumes and props by day, and sometimes rampages around as the Gladiator whenever he's feeling more disturbed than usual by night. Though, as it's later revealed, this specific rampage was committed by someone else wearing the Gladiator suit. And during this issue is one of Foggy and Matt's annual falling outs, so it's mainly Matt and Becky doing the lawyering. And there's some delicate stuff that comes up with Becky being beaten in the past, which could have been covered more delicately, but the end result of Michael Reese, the Gladiator lookalike, and the criminal being testified against by Becky after he crippled her is a nice comeuppance, though it's still mostly just tragic. But it's a court case I wouldn't mind seeing in live action as a way to bring up some of that complexity, but also as a way to introduce Becky Blake, who, to my knowledge, has not been introduced to live action at all. But moving on to number 4, Griggs versus Daredevil. And this starts out in number 20 of Bendis' run in the arc Playing to the Camera, which is written by Bob Gale. And this story takes place right after the Wake Up arc, and right before Daredevil's identity is outed, the second of which already made it onto this list. And the first one, Wake Up, doesn't feature any courtroom drama, but I still wanted to shout it out. If you haven't read it, please do. It's on the surrealist side, and honestly is just hard to understand, but David Mack's art is easily some of the best out there. But I gotta stop getting sidetracked, because we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Playing to the Camera, which admittedly has too many moving parts, including the Jester getting released from prison, a reformed villain that we have seen in She-Hulk named the Matador being mind-controlled, and just plenty of new names to learn. But it's all worth it for the court scenes alone. In it, a wealthy businessman named Samuel Griggs sues Daredevil for wanton destruction and property damage, and after a lot of deliberation, Matt decides to represent him against his alter ego. And this comic has a lot to say about property damage and necessary restitutions, with so much compelling dialogue about it throughout. But the reason it's not at number 1 on this list, like it honestly could have been without this flaw, is how convoluted the whole story is. First off, there's the fact that Griggs is completely obnoxious, which is by design, but doesn't work too well in making the story's point, because it's just a rich guy who lost a fraction of his property and is whining about it. He does manage to bring up some genuinely good points about how he wanted to bring this case forward not for profit, but because he wanted to show that there were consequences. So Matt takes the case mainly just because he doesn't want another blood-sucking lawyer to take it, but also because Griggs promises to donate $100,000 to a charity for blind children, so Matt pretty much has to take it. Meanwhile, Daredevil enlists the help of a new lawyer named Kate Vinegar, who has a thing with Daredevil, as all women within a 1-mile radius of him do, and with her, there's lots of fun back and forth trying to get the case settled before it gets to court. But during the actual case, a random guy with a Daredevil costume I guess he bought or found breaks through one of the windows and claims that the property damage at the center of the case was caused by him. And this is all while another Daredevil impersonator is on the stand for a cross-examination by Matt Murdock, who is the impersonator brought in by Matt himself so that Daredevil and Matt could be in the same room. It's not Iron Fist like I thought for sure he'd be, it's Spider-Man. And all that is a ton of fun because I'll always love seeing a complex secret identity dynamic be pushed to its extreme, but I just wish it wrapped up a bit better, because it turns out, from Griggs himself to that random Matador guy, everyone was being mind controlled by the Ringmaster, who wasn't even doing it as one big conspiracy. He only wanted to implant false memories to be a petty dick, messing with Daredevil, and also so he could test out the technology for use much later on in another arc entirely. But now, getting down to the final three, let's start out with The People versus Simon Slagansky, which is in Charles Soule's arc, Supreme, kicking off in issue 21 of his 2016 series. And instantly, this case becomes memorable just from how much time is spent in the courtroom itself. If we're lucky, most court scenes in Daredevil's comics will involve a few panels, a couple pages at the very most, with very rare exceptions like this and the rest on the list, where entire sequences or even issues are devoted to the back and forth of cross-examinations and platitude-filled speeches. Though this case is also memorable because it has Daredevil appearing on the witness stand in costume, something he has done before and after this many times, though he's usually on the other side, proving the ineffectiveness of allowing masked individuals to assist in a system that fundamentally requires, you know, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. But this time around, he testifies in costume in an attempt to set a precedent that superheroes can anonymously testify against criminals. And as pointed out by Matt, there are plenty of empirical examples of anonymous or confidential testimonies, so it's very muddy, but it's technically legal for Daredevil to do so. But before getting to the case, however, this comic features Luke Cage, Echo, and Daredevil teaming up to apprehend a henchman of a small-time gang called The Clip, or even a C-lister of theirs to build a case around. But the best they can get is Simon Slagansky, a nobody. With him, Matt enlists the help of some paralegals and not Foggy, since this is during one of their classic falling outs, and the first trial goes surprisingly well, making it so this case could potentially set that revolutionary precedent, where Daredevil could use the evidence at a crime scene gathered with his senses in a court of law. In Daredevil's words, no more dumping criminals on the street and waiting for them to be picked up by the police. Superheroes would be able to openly communicate and work within the legal system. But then, Kingpin steps in, who brings in a whole bunch of contingencies, including a conniving ploy with Tombstone, but mainly it's a specialist that he brings in that upends Daredevil's plans. That being a shady but extremely effective lawyer that used to be on Tony Stark's payroll, who is named Legal. And Legal absolutely annihilates Matt even after he goes to Jen Walters for consulting. Matt later says that he threw the case against Legal so he could take it to the Supreme Court, but I don't buy that for a second. Matt is often labeled as the best lawyer in all of Marvel, and he is good, but I think it's much more compelling if there are people out there who are just better than him, which is especially easier to believe since those people can devote their entire life to it, whereas as committed as Matt wants to be, he can only spend so much time in the legal world. Of course, after Matt's devastating loss, as the name of the comic arc implies, and as I've already said, this goes all the way to the Supreme Court. And there's a really cool scene where Matt is again verbally eviscerated, but it's visualized this time as if they're throwing actual punches at him. But in the end, Matt is victorious and wins the case. Although I wish that meant more, because it's said that the confidentiality protections given to superheroes in court would be drastic, but to my knowledge, this never really comes up again, yet it still made it this far onto the list. And now, number 2. Forger versus Rogers, in issue 9 and 10 of Charles Soule's 2014 She-Hulk run, which features one of the rare times that Daredevil and She-Hulk have found themselves on opposite sides of a case. And I may not love the art in this, but the conversations brought up are next to none. In it, Old Man Cap sees himself in a wrongful death lawsuit, which is sadly pretty open and shut, with Steve being witness saying, "This is all my fault," right after. And Jen wants to file that it's impossible for Cap to be prosecuted since there's a lot of convoluted stuff with him, you know, now being old. But Cap doesn't want to win on any technicalities. And I'm being intentionally vague about what Cap is actually being tried for because that's revealed throughout the case and I don't want to spoil it. But the end result is that Cap inadvertently got someone killed by just refusing to stand down and shut up, making it so Cap was guilty in a manner of the word, but with so much more to the story. It's also revealed that the only reason Matt took the case was because Cap told him to, and the whole reason why any of it played out in the first place was to draw out the man responsible for bringing all of this previously buried information out into the light, that being Dr. Faustus, who is not important. And before getting to the first, and according to me, best court case in Daredevil, I wanted to bring up some honorable mentions. The first of which, and easily the most fun, is seen in issue number 36 of Mark Waid's run. A pretty breezy run overall, but wildly entertaining. But in this specific arc, Matt is seen attempting to take down the Serpent Society, who are made out to be a somewhat threatening organization in this, but I never took any story with them that seriously. But the way that Matt defeats them, on the other hand, is very interesting, because in court, while testifying, he admits to being Daredevil, and this is where he fully comes out, even donning a bright red suit and going to court as an unmasked Daredevil. Of course, it didn't take too long for the status quo to rear its ugly head again, but it was a really entertaining ride while it lasted. There's also the time Matt, as a DA prosecutor, was charged with taking down some scumbag from selling tickets to see a weird sadistic blood painting in issue number 11 of Charles Soule's run, and Matt doesn't go through with it because he doesn't want to set the precedent that the law can take down people's art, but this example is really noteworthy because it's the introduction of Muse, though before he reveals himself, the public dons him with the name Van Gogh. And another, I don't know if entertaining is the right word, but it's certainly a compelling example, is the case against Ben Donovan, which isn't technically a court case, but I still really like the mystery in it. And this can be found in the story arc Sympathy for the Devil from issue number 106 to 110 in Ed Brubaker's run. In it, a criminal who is guilty of plenty of other heinous charges is put on death row, but something about it doesn't smell right. And this is in the middle of a bunch of stuff happening to Matt, as it always seems to be, but this especially features a depressed Matt projecting his guilt onto this man, hence why he so adamantly wants to defend him. And my last honorable mention is the trial of Kingpin, and this probably could have and should have made it onto the list as one of the official spots, but too much was skimmed over for me to ever truly consider it. And this is with Kingpin as mayor and takes place at the end of the Death of Daredevil run, and has some great art. Like the Van Gogh blood painting, I think this is prime real estate for an adaptation into the Disney Plus show, though if done at all, Kingpin's trial would be more of a series finale kind of thing. But now, the moment you've all been waiting for, number 1. And if you're a Daredevil fan, even a casual one, you probably know what this is. And part of me wanted to make something else the winner, to be a contrarian against the masses, but also to not be so incredibly predictable. Yet every step along the way, from rereading this classic comic to writing this script out, every fiber in my being was compelled by this story the most. And if your gut is continuously telling you something, odds are it's right. And Daredevil's Trial of the Century doesn't have that name for nothing, and this can of course be found in the Trial of the Century story arc, beginning with number 38 of Bendis's run. This is one court case that I have gone back to on multiple occasions, reading the isolated court scenes just for the hell of it. And this is yet another case I want to see make its way into the show Born Again, since it has the vigilante White Tiger being accused of killing a cop while he's trying to stop a small-time robbery, something that does seem to be happening, or at least something similar, in the Disney Plus show. It's also similar to the Ben Donovan honorable mention because it features a depressed and angry Matt projecting the guilt that constantly eats away at himself onto Hector Ayala, making Matt feel that he desperately needs to put everything into getting him acquitted of the false charges. Bringing in all kinds of character witnesses and superhero experts, Matt pulls out the stops, but unfortunately, the prosecution is just too good, and the case goes pretty badly for Hector Ayala. And if you want to know just how badly, then check out the comic. But that wraps up my list of my 13 favorite Daredevil court cases. Are you confused why a specific case didn't make it on the list? Or are you outraged at the order of what was there? Drop a comment and let me know your thoughts. And as always, thanks for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe for weekly video essays and reviews, and enjoy a delicious sandwich.